Okay, so let's begin with a little meditation and try to set our motivation. It's good to hear Dorji relaxing there. Very deep relaxation. Breathe out all that defiled energy. And try to place your attention, first of all, just on the respiration. Place your mindfulness in front, as it's said in the sutras many times. The Buddha sat down, placed his mindfulness in front upon the respiration to calm his mind. As you begin to do this, recognize that you may still be paying much attention to your eye consciousness, your ear consciousness. So try to remind yourself that's not consciousness that I'm paying attention to. Withdraw slightly inside and just focus on the one object, the breathing. Focusing on one object and not following blindly all of the different thought patterns that are coming, you notice your mind reaching a different state, starting to become more clear, more calm, more controlled. Bring your attention inward, bring your mindfulness inward to the consciousness itself, the mental consciousness, because you do have 5 other consciousnesses, but the mental consciousness within which you have conceptual activity, which is lacking in the other sense consciousnesses, and just use one part of that mind to observe the nature of the mind. its clear light nature. Whatever remaining discursive thoughts may be coursing through your mind, whatever appearances or sense of the self, the ego, they're all like clouds within the otherwise pristine, clear light nature of your mind. Whatever images arise, even if there's the lingering sense of the body, let go of them in an instant by recognizing that they are appearing within the clear light nature of your mind, and as though turning your attention away from them, or perhaps alternately as though seeing through them, sense the subjective mind, the matrix, the womb of the mind within which those are arisen. To be able to develop tranquil abiding, calm abiding, you have to have a mental object that you first recall without forgetfulness. So this is after the fault of laziness, the next fault that has to be overcome, or at least attempted. Of course, laziness takes a long time to eradicate completely. But the next fault is forgetting the instruction, which means forgetting what the object that you're trying to observe, in this case, the clear light nature of your mind. So recall that again and again. And try to keep a continuity of mental fixing of the mind, stabilizing the mind on that, in that state, observing it. Recalling that we are attempting to practice the Buddhist path, Lord Buddha as our teacher, the Dharma as he is teaching the medicine that he, as the supreme physician, has prescribed, and the spiritual friends like the nurses that help us take that medicine. In order to explain the actual workings of our mind and the universe, the Buddha explained in various discourses to various people at least 4 different systems of philosophical thought. In order to fathom the most profound and deepest of those, we've been studying the lower tenets, the Hinayana tenets, and also the mind-only Chittamatra tenets of the Mahayana. So think, for the purpose of myself overcoming my own afflictions based on ego grasping. In order to do that, I have to realize the ultimate nature of reality, the emptiness of myself and all phenomena. Thereby, I can solve my own problems, have the freedom, the space in my mind to develop compassion for all living beings, seeing that there's no difference between myself and others ultimately. How wonderful it would be to be able to work effortlessly, spontaneously, like the great gurus, the Dalai Lama, the Buddha himself, to bring joy, to overcome the sorrow of all living beings without any discrimination, friend, enemy, stranger. For that purpose, I'm going to listen to, participate in the class tonight again, and continue the study of the philosophical schools, both to develop wisdom, and thereby also to augment my compassion, to understand the path that I am and will be treading to enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. And then bring your attention back to the present. Relax. Okay. Sometime you're over. Oh, it's a different class? You sit over there, or do you sit over there? Oh, you usually sit there. Before you were sitting last term. Okay. So, we're talking about the tenets. Steve, do you remember how many schools, philosophical schools, in the text that we're studying? How many philosophical schools are there?
Mahayanas, vehicle, and I believe there's 3 others. Theravada is one.
Okay, now would anyone like to debate? What do you think, Venerable? Debate with Steve. Now, so this is his assertion that we started the debate by saying.
Mental factors class. This is just the second time I've been here.
Oh, okay. Well, what's weird? Something about slack? Give you a little slack? Draw you a little slack? We'll cut you a little slack. Okay, I'll cut you a lot of slack. But if you were, the assertion, let's say that someone were to say that the philosophical schools, there's the Mahayana and 3 others, such as the Theravada. What would you say, Venerable? From the text that we're studying, Jason Turkey Gelson's text, is that a good answer?
Are they philosophical schools, the Mahayana?
Mm-hmm. So
That's what I would ask. No, that's what I would ask back. Is that what you're asking me, yes?
Is that what you're asking me, whether I'm asking you?
Your response. That's what I thought you were asking me.
Mm-hmm. What would you say?
What would I say what the 4 schools are?
Say you were out of compassion, you wanted to quickly, say that Steve was of sharp intellect and he was capable of not just being led sort of piecemeal, slowly, but you could sort of just cut through and remind him of things. He hasn't been to the class before, but say you could, what would you say? Is that the right answer? How many philosophical schools are there?
There's 4 philosophical schools.
So are they the Mahayana and 3 others?
No.
No. So what would you say? What are the 4 philosophical schools?
The Vaibhashika,
Vaibhashika,
Swatantrika,
Swatantra?
Not Sal Tantrika.
Saltrantika, right? Like sutra, Saltrantika. Those fall into which vehicle?
The Hinayana.
Hinayana. And then?
The Chittimatra.
Chittimatra.
And the Madhyamika.
And Madhyamaka. Those fall into which vehicle?
The Mahayana.
Mahayana. So, when we talk about the philosophical schools, we're not talking so much about the vehicles, but the philosophy that someone who practices those different vehicles might have. So the word for tenet we saw at the beginning of the course was in Tibetan drupta, established limit, you might say. Ta means limit or end. Drup means that which is established. So something that you've set down and you've settled on as the demarcations of what the philosophical view is. So there are 4 philosophical schools, and we've talked about the Vaibhashika, the Sautrantika, the Chittimatra, and now we're talking about the Madhyamaka. And last time we mentioned that there are, how many divisions of the Madhyamaka are there? Do you know, Don? Do you remember?
What divisions of what, I'm sorry?
How many divisions of the Madhyamaka are there?
2, the Svatantrika and Pratyeka.
So the Svatantrika and the Madhyamaka and the Prasankika. So what was the definition? Let's take a look. Let's go back and take a look at the definition of a Svatantrika, because that was the part that comes first. This is, in the text here, it's called the autonomy middle way. Svatantra in Tibetan is Rangyupa. Oftentimes, if you listen to, maybe in the coming days, perhaps Rebbe Rinpoche may mention some of these terms. If your ear is familiar with them, you may begin to hear some of these words. Rangyupa is how you say Svatantrika in Tibetan. Like Sva, Rang, self, and Gyu also means Tantra, means continuum. So the definition of a Svatantrika is a Madhyamika. Is that right? A Madhyamika or a Madhyamaka? This is good, a Madhyamika, because that Madhyamika means the person who practices the Madhyamaka, according to some people who study grammar. So the definition of a Svatantrika is a Madhyamika who, by means of positing a reason that exists from its own side, does not accept true existence even nominally. So what was we had a definition of a Madhyamaka earlier, didn't we? Do we have a definition of the Madhyamaka in general? Definition of, in the second sentence down at the top of the page, the definition of a proponent of non-entityness. That's a synonym of, proponent of non-entityness is a synonym of a Madhyamika, okay? Someone who propounds that there is no entity, true existing entity. So is a person who propounds Mahayana tenets and does not assert or does not accept true existence even nominally. Wow, what about the Vaibhashikas? Did they accept true existence? Some things were truly existent? In fact, everything for them, everything that existed was truly existent, wasn't it? For the Vaibhashika?
External phenomena.
That was they're talking about ultimate truth, right? So there's a little bit different. Sometimes that's why this kind of introduction to the tenets is something that probably maybe we'll study this again in deeper. On another occasion we'll have a chance to study tenets, and on the basis of having laid this foundation, you'll start to make some other associations and see some things that now are just sort of like, because first time, right? So kind of like, well, just getting your footing. So the Vaibhashikas say everything is truly existent. remember when we talked about the three turnings of the wheel of Dharma? Do you remember that, Mark?
Mm-hmm.
The first turning of the wheel mainly was presenting that all phenomena are truly existent. It was the Buddha's teaching of the Four Noble Truths that he taught in Sarnath in India, and other of the Theravada canon, those teachings. Those are mainly associated with the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, where the Buddha was just assuming, the assumption was that all phenomena were truly existent, but the self was not truly existent? No, that couldn't be. If all phenomena are truly existent, the self couldn't be truly existent. The self was empty of being self-supporting and substantially existent. But all phenomena that existed were truly existent. Also in the Sautrantika, the other Hinayana school, phenomena are asserted to be truly existent, phenomena that exist. In the Chittamatra, are all phenomena truly existent? Venerable, have you been listening to the course? You're just visiting us tonight, right?
I've been to a couple of classes.
For the Chittamatra, are all phenomena truly existent? So serious thing, a good smile breaks out.
I can't remember what they say truly existent means.
Frank, do you remember?
You said Chittamatra?
Yeah. Chittamatra.
Chittamatrans are based upon the third turning of the wheel, so they believe that some things are existent, but some things are not.
Some things are truly existent, some things are not. Right. So remember the three natures. They said that dependent phenomena and the thoroughly established were truly existent, but imaginary phenomena, some of which existed, and some of which are non-existent, imaginary phenomena are not truly existent. So they now they're hedging their bets. Before, the lower school said everything is truly existent. Now when we get to the Madhyamaka, the Madhyamikas say, or the proponents of non-entityness, they say, excuse me, nothing that exists is truly existent. How about if I said it that way? What if I said something that doesn't exist?
That
Whether-
doesn't exist.
Is that truly existent? I kind of phrased it as though if it exists, it has to be truly existent. Maybe sort of leaves maybe some crevice in the mind. So if it doesn't exist, maybe it is truly existent. No, anything, whether it's existent or non-existent, does not exist truly. Nothing exists as a truly existent phenomena for the Madhyamaka. Now, we have a slightly different meaning between the two schools, the Svatantrika and the Prasangika, of what constitutes true existence. Both of them say the same thing. They both say, as it said here, the definition of a proponent of non-entityness, that means a Madhyamaka, or Madhyamika, is one who propounds Mahayana tenets and does not assert true existence even nominally. Probably you could leave off the thing about asserting Mahayana tenets, because if you were just tried to make a very precise definition, you could say, since none of the schools below Madhyamaka assert that there is no true existence, even nominally, everyone says there is some kind of true existence, even that statement alone would place them out from the lower schools, right? Okay, so of the two schools, the Svatantrika and the Prasangika. So now, a Svatantrika is a Madhyamika who, if we start from the end of the sentence, does not accept or does not assert true existence even nominally, right? That made him or her a Madhyamika, by means of positing a reason that exists from its own side. So here's the rub. Where's that from?
Shakespeare.
Vix. Good. Here they're saying, although phenomena don't exist truly, even conventionally, still phenomena exist from their own side, because you can propose a reasoning, which the connection between the predicate, the subject, the predicate, and the sign, the example, all of these modes have some kind of real existence from their own side. This was the origin of the original debate that sort of later Chandrakirti was able to, in a sense, I remember he criticized Bhava Viveka. Bhava Viveka had himself made a critique of Buddha Palita, who was kind of one of the first people who explained Nagarjuna's philosophy from, in a sense, from the Prasangika point of view. First there was Nagarjuna and his disciple Aryadeva. Median was asking today, he'd heard a Nyingma Lama mention that it was good to read Nagarjuna's text on Majjhamaka. So his main text was called, sometimes it's just called the Middle Way, sometimes it's just called Majjhamaka, sometimes it's called Mula Prajna. Do you know what that means in Sanskrit, Median? Mula Prajna? Mula, do you know what mula means? Well, you know prajna, we know prajna, right? Wisdom, right? Mula means root. Like in Bodh Gaya, the Root Institute, do you know, have you heard of Root Institute? You've been there, Diana? So the rickshaw drivers, they all know it as Mula Sthana. You know, the Mula, the Root Institute. So, first, Nagarjuna, some 400 years after Buddha passed away, approximately, maybe something, prophesied something like that, he sought out the Prajnaparamita Sutras that were hidden, and it said that some of them were actually kept with the Nagas. Do you know the story of what happened? Have you heard it before? Apparently, Nagarjuna was schooled in the Hinayana tenets also, and in the Mahayana. He was a great scholar already. And he was giving a discourse, I think, when two individuals who looked like princes were there, but they always had incense with them, and they wanted to talk to them, as though they couldn't stand the smell of the humans, which is kind of a sign that they were Nagas, actually, manifesting as humans. So he called them on it. I guess that's what you'd say, right? He called their bluff and asked them why they were there, and they said that somehow it came out that the Nagas had preserved the 100,000 verse Prajnaparamita, parts of which, or all of which, was not available in the human realm. Remember sometimes we talk about the three mothers, the small, the medium, and the great Prajnaparamita Sutras. They're all talking about one particular occasion. There were other Prajnaparamita Sutras that talked about other occasions, like the Heart Sutra is a different occasion than the 8, the 25, and the 100,000 verse. So the 100,000 verse was kind of not available amongst the humans. The Nagas had preserved it. So Nagarjuna, with his psychic power, was able to travel to the Naga land and bring back portions or large portion of the 100,000 verse that was missing. And he also, for many hundreds of years, lived. It said that he lived according to the Mahayana tradition, and especially as in Tibet, the Tibetans believe that he lived for something like 600 years. Almost like, how long did Methuselah live in the Bible? Something similar, longer, 900? So there were different periods of his life when he wrote different kinds of texts. And the main text that he's famous for in terms of the sutra, he did write texts on the Guhya Samaja Tantra and the stages of secret mantra. When Kriti Senchab Rinpoche was teaching some months ago, that was kind of the basis of the Guhya Samaja presentation, came from Nagarjuna's text and Chandrakirti's text. So that was their tantric writings. But Nagarjuna, when he wrote about the Mahayana, he mainly was writing from this one text called the Majjhamaka, the Middle Way, or Mula Prajna, sometimes called the Majjhamaka Shastra, the commentary on the Middle Way, and or the Mula Prajna. In Tibetan we say Sawe Sherab, the root of wisdom. So it's two names for the same text. They're given the same text. His main disciple, while he was alive, was called Aryadeva. You've heard of Aryadeva, no? Remember when we talked about the ornaments, the trailblazers and the ornaments? Aryadeva was amongst them, I believe. Aryadeva wrote commentaries to Nagarjuna's writings. He was like personal disciple of Nagarjuna. And they are called, in a sense, the later scholars called them non-sectarian Majjhamikas, or Majjhamikas, because at that point they weren't differentiating, I am a Svatantrika, I am a Prasangika. It hasn't come about. I think the earlier Tantrikas also that talked about Majjhamika view, like Saraha. Have you heard of Saraha? One of the Mahasiddhas, rather, the 84 Mahasiddhas. Others like that were non-sectarian Majjhamikas. Then Buddhapalita wrote a text that explained Nagarjuna's view some hundreds of years later. Mainly, although it wasn't called Prasangika yet, he was not depending on the need to have a syllogism, a logical reasoning. The kind of one of the premises of the Prasangika is that in a sharp disciple, you can cause a realization of emptiness to be generated merely by stating an absurd consequence of their wrong view. You don't even have to state. You don't have to sort of first eliminate their wrong view and then state the right view with a positive syllogism. So Buddhapalita had written a text called Buddhapalita, which was a commentary to the Fundamental Wisdom, Nagarjuna's text. And quite soon afterwards, Bhava Viveka criticized Buddhapalita's text, saying, oh, you're doing all of these syllogisms wrong. You're not writing in the right way, these reasonings. You should have autonomous syllogisms. Because the implication was, it came out in other scholars later, that Bhava Viveka's view kind of presupposed that although phenomena were not truly existent, in some sense that we haven't yet defined what true existence is, yet still they existed from their own side. There was something about the basis that was still there that you could label something onto. For things to be truly existent for the Svatantrikas, they would have to exist completely from their own side without the need of mental labeling, without the need of being conceptually imputed by the mind. But still, they say, in order to impute those things, in order to impute flower onto these, there has to be something existing, some basis, inherently existent or existing from its own side here to be able to impute it onto. So they're kind of hedging their bets. A little bit like maybe the Chittamatra, remember, said some things are truly existent, some are not. So the Svatantrikas now are another level of subtlety. They're saying nothing is truly existent at all. Nothing is truly existent, but still something existing from its own side. The Prasangikas, does that seem problematic? Yeah. The Prasangikas would say if anything is existing from its own side, that would imply true existence. So they have for the Svatantrika, they say that there are a bunch of synonyms of non-true existence. Things are not truly existent. But there are certain things that do exist. There is existence from its own side, a natural existence, an inherent existence. So that's one of the characteristics that differentiates them. And here, so it's talking about a Svatantrika is a Majjhamika who, by means of positing a reason that exists from its own side. So they're talking about logical premises that you're trying to prove emptiness, that whole logical reasoning also inherently exists, but doesn't truly exist. So even if this sounds like mumbo jumbo or gumbo soup or something, maybe you get some idea, okay? So then it says the Svatantrika is mutually inclusive or synonymous with a Madhyamika who propounds natural existence or inherent existence. It's another way of translating this word, Rangshengi Drupa. In the Heart Sutra, we had this, things are empty of existing inherently. So a Svatantrika is synonymous with a Madhyamika who propounds natural existence or inherent existence. So the Prasangikas do not propound inherent existence. They say there's nothing that is inherently existent. There is nothing that is truly existent. Okay? So this kind of differentiating between them. So there are two divisions of the Svatantrikas we mentioned last time. The Sautrantika Svatantrikas, or if you make it long, Sautrantika Svatantrika Madhyamika. And this is Angie's mantra for the week, because you were saying, for Sautrantika, you were saying Svatantrika. So you have to look at these words and see how they're spelled. Sautratika and Svatantrika. See, tika and trika, see where the R's are? You have to look at those. One is Sau and one is Sva. So this general Madhyamika school is called the Svatantrika Rangyupa, like Svabhava Shuddha. Sva means self or autonomy. So there's the Sautrantika Svatantrikas and the Yogacara Svatantrikas. The definition of the former, that is the Sautrantika Svatantrikas, are Madhyamikas who propound a presentation of nominal existence, for the most part, in accordance with the Sautrantika tenets, that is the Hinayana tenets, that Sautrantikas. Not all at all, but a lot similar when they talk about nominal phenomena, nominal existence, just how phenomena exist conventionally in terms of what Madhyamika means by conventional existence. Now we're starting to get to the point when we get to the Madhyamika, the Madhyamaka, we're starting to get to the point where the meaning of conventional or nominal existence on one hand and ultimate existence on the other hand, they become more stabilized, what's meant. Earlier when we talked about ultimate existence, like Don was thinking at the beginning, remember Don, you were saying, when I was asking, or someone, or maybe I can't remember, when I was talking about true existence, you were saying, you're probably confusing with the Vaibhashika view about ultimate truth. They said ultimate truths were things that were, well, for the Vaibhashika, what was an ultimate truth? Diana? You have to help. Diana's your conscience. Okay. So what is an ultimate truth for a Vaibhashika?
If you physically or mentally break apart something, it's still
it's the mind apprehending it is not damaged. That would be an ultimate truth, like partless particles and things like this. But the thing you're thinking of is the Sautrantika definition of ultimate truth. Carrie, you're nodding your head. You remember?
I think it's the opposite.
Maybe not the opposite, but it's more of what Don was saying, isn't it? That it's ultimately able to perform a function. In some ways, there's some parts that are opposite, but not everything is opposite. They say ultimate truths are things that are ultimately able to perform a function. How about the Chittamatra? What were ultimate truths for them? Do you remember, Mark? I'm almost tempted to ask Frank. He's had a chance to go over some of these. He's primed back there.
Ask Frank.
Hey, Frank. No,
That
you're
worked
Mark.
weeks ago, but
Yeah. Last year you were Frank something.
Yeah,
You were Al something.
no, I don't remember.
Who recalls Chittamatra?
Isn't it for ultimate truth?
Yeah, what is an ultimate truth for?
It's perceived by a direct perceiver, but without it. Wait.
In a
With
non-dualistic,
a non-dualistic mind, in conventional.
in a non-dualistic fashion, right? So they had that has to be analyzed what exactly that means, but it doesn't mean exactly the same thing that we mean here. Nargajuna said in Fundamental Wisdom and some other texts, he didn't write only Fundamental Wisdom, he wrote a lot of texts. One great set of texts were called the 6 Treatises on Reasoning, one of which I think is Fundamental Wisdom. And then he wrote some praises, collection of praises. Many of the prayers that we say actually come from Nargajuna's texts. In one of the texts that he wrote in several places, he says, all phenomena can be included in 2 truths, conventional and ultimate. Or this word conventional, which sometimes here is another word that's synonymous with it, is nominal. When they say nominal existence, it's talking about conventional existence. That's the word samvriti that we talked about a couple times. In Tibetan, the usual way that people translate it is kunsop. If you talk about conventional truth, usually the Tibetan is kunsop dempa. Literally, it means all-concealing truth, or truth for a concealing mind. Zopa means zop, not sopa like lama sopa, but zop, D-Z-O-B, means to cover or to conceal. So the implication is, for the Madhyamaka, conventional truths are truths for ignorant, they're not really truths, they're only truth for a mind which is covered or which conceals itself reality, which is covered by ignorance. Or as Jeffrey Hopkins used to say many years ago, he gave a lecture in Dharamsala, I think he wrote an article once he called conventional truth, truth for a jerk. They're not really truths, they're only truth for a jerk. Like maybe today there's some things that people consider conventional wisdom that we would say that's not really true. That's truth for a jerk. Michael Jackson is cool, or Britney Spears is this or that. Some people might think that's true, but that's not really true. It's only true for a mind that's completely. No offense to Michael Jackson, but or Britney Spears. But you get my point. So all phenomena are either conventional truths or ultimate truths. Conventional truths means truths for a concealing mind. That's one of the meanings of this Sanskrit word samvriti, or Tibetan word kunsop. Also, it means that they're just truths nominally. They're not really ultimately truths. They're only truths nominally. That is, they're given names. And that's the extent of their existence. For the Prasangika, that's the only extent of phenomana's existence. Median exists just as a name, just as a concept. Although you might say, well, excuse me, that's Median. And Median may be thinking, excuse me, what do you mean? I'm just a name. You might say, well, I'm a body. Actually, Median is a name we designate to the collection of his 5 aggregates. And other than that Median, if you try to search within the 5 aggregates, you can't find any other thing that we conceive of, that we kind of assume is there. There's a real Median findable. That's the sense of true existence that the Prasangika is talking about, the sense of some kind of findability from the side of the basis of designation. Prasangika says there's nothing there whatsoever. If there were anything there whatsoever that was really Median, Median would be truly existent. The Svatantrikas say, indeed, Median does exist just imputed onto the aggregates, but somehow there has to be something existing. The basis to be called Median has to exist from its own side. Otherwise, you would be valid in calling this vase of flowers Median. If there wasn't something which was inherently a basis for labeling Median, you could label anything. That's kind of one of the other kinds of ways of getting at this difference. So we said the definition of the Sautrantika Svatantrikas were those that whose presentation of nominal existence or conventional existence accorded with the Sautrantika tenets for the most part, and the definition of the Yogacara Svatantrikas were those whose presentation of conventional or nominal existence accorded with the Chittamatra tenets for the most part. And then we gave the examples last time of some of the famous Sautrantika Svatantrikas, like Bhavaviveka himself, the kind of, in a sense, the founder of the Svatantrika could be categorized as a Sautrantika Svatantrika, and also Jnana Garbha. In Tibetan, we say Yeshi Ningbo is another famous Sautrantika Svatantrika. Then of the Yogacara Svatantrikas, we mentioned Shantarakshita. Did that come up in this last weekend? Did Rinpoche mention Shantarakshita? I can't remember for some reason. No? Shantarakshita, remember, was the abbot who came to Tibet and who was instrumental in bringing Guru Padmasambhava to Tibet, and whose disciple Kamalashila, who was the last in that list, actually defeated the Chinese scholar Hashan Mahayana. And then also Senge Sangbo, this is Hari Badra. Senge means lion in Tibetan. Hari, I'm not sure, when you say Hari Ram, that Hari doesn't mean lion, does it? Hari Ram, Hari Krishna?
Well, I mean,
that's maybe a different spelling or a different word. Hari, like Hari Badra, in the name Hari Badra, I think that Hari means lion.
well, I mean, Hari, there's a form of Hari that is a lion.
Uh-huh.
So,
Okay, maybe that's one of the various meanings of the word Hari. Maybe it can mean other things.
Hari means Lord.
Lord,
I mean, there's a lion form of the Lord.
right. So in the name Hari Badra, which is Senge Sangbo, the Tibetans have taken Hari as meaning lion, Senge. Do you know some Tibetans named Senge? Sangye is a different word, right? Sangye means what? Buddha. Senge is different, like lion face dakini, Seng Dongma. Seng for Senge. Dong is a word that means face. So when we do the Heart Sutra at the beginning of the teachings, first we recite the Heart Sutra, then we recite a little verse that invokes the dakinis of all the different realms, and we recite the mantra of the wrathful Prajnaparamita, which is the lion-faced dakini. Akasamara Sashana Samara. You know, this one that we recite 21 times. And then we recite the peaceful Prajnaparamita Sutra, mantra, which is what? Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhisattva. That's the peaceful Prajnaparamita, which is actual tantric deity, a female deity. Sengdoma, the lion-faced dakini, is the wrathful form of that. So Senge Sangbo. Then the etymology, it says, it doesn't say exactly, it sort of uses Bhavaviveka as the reason here. It says, the reason why Bhavaviveka is called a Svatantrika Majjhimika is that he is a Majjhimika who asserts reasons that exist from their own side. Okay, because that was the original origin of Chandrakirti's text that he wrote in defense of Buddhapalita. Yeah.
In the text, it goes through that reasoning, and it confuses me at least.
This is which one is that?
This is page 283.
That's cutting through appearances, yeah, 283.
Under etymology. It goes through an explanation of the sign, correct sign, and so forth. And then at the end, on 283, about halfway down, the autonomous assert that a correct reason inherently possesses these three aspects within the context
Of not ultimately existing.
That they do not ultimately exist means that they are not established by way of their own uncommon mode of existence without being posited through the force of appearing to a non-defective awareness.
Mm-hmm. So this is going into more detail. Like if we had, if we had like 6 months to study tenets, we would go and look. No, but we'll talk a little bit about this as we go along. But this is kind of like, in a sense, an introduction to tenets, and we can study this text again sometime, and we'll understand a bit more. So what this is meaning is, here, let's just read this. This is good, because here, this is the why they're called Svatantrika. They weren't, Bhava Viveka didn't call himself a Svatantrika. Other Svatantrikas didn't use that word. That was a word that, in a sense, later Tibetan scholars implied. And in fact, hard to be absolutely certain, it was very common in Sanskrit, Svatantrika and Prasangika. It's kind of something that came from the Tibetan scholars, differentiating the different schools. So Bhava Viveka and the other Svatantrikas, remember their point was that the reasons that could prove non-true existence, not prove true existence, prove non-true existence, the reasons themselves didn't truly exist, but they naturally existed. They were inherently existent. So that's something that the debate about that's where you really have to get your mind around these things. And I think it could be very complicated. Let's see. Why are they called proponents of the middle way autonomy school? This is what autonomy school means, Svatantrika, right? They are called such because they refute truly existent things through relying on a correct logical sign whose three aspects exist from their own side. Now, up till there, that's in accord with what we've talked about up till now, right?
So they do truly exist.
No, they don't truly exist. They say there's a difference between truly existent and existing from their own side. Remember, there were three synonyms here, hypothetical synonyms, in number 4, mode of asserting objects. Existence by way of its own characteristic, I think is rangi tsenigi drupa. Existence from its own side, rangi ngonegi drupa, something like that. And rangshengi drupa, natural, the last one where it says natural existence, you could write in parentheses there, and the way that we often translate that is inherent existence. These three things do exist, and they are different than true existence. Nothing for the Svatantrikas, they say, because they're Madhyamikas, nothing truly exists. All the Madhyamikas, that's their hallmark, right? Nothing is truly existent. But phenomena do exist from their own side. They inherently exist, or naturally exist, and they exist by their own characteristics. And why the later Tibetan scholars called these the Svatantrikas was because of this particular way of Bhava Viveka's criticism of Buddhapalita, that logical reasonings could be posited because they did exist inherently. So the commentary in the text here says, a correct logical sign or reason must have three qualities. Remember we talked about the three modes? Remember what they were? Done? Yeah. Logical reasoning?
Yeah, subject, predicate, and sign.
No, those aren't the three.
Oh.
The three modes are what? That is, in order for it to be a correct reasoning, there had to be three things that existed. The property of the subject.
Sign has to invade.
Which is called what? The forward pervasion and
Reverse
pervasion. Those are called the three modes. So that's what they're using. He's saying there have to be three qualities. The sign must be a property of the subject. The sign must be pervaded by the predicate. That is, the predicate must be something that is always true of the reason. And the opposite of the predicate must be pervaded by the opposite of the sign. So you're familiar with that from some of the things we studied before, right? The three modes. For example, then he gives an example from the kind of reasoning that the Madhyamika would be concerned about. A person does not truly exist because of being a dependent arising. In fact, you could say any phenomena does not truly exist because it is dependent arising. for this is called the king of reasonings, king of reasons, to use the reason that phenomena are not dependent arisings. They're a little bit different what's meant for the Svatantrika by being dependent arisings and what's meant to be a dependent arising for the Prasangika. What do you think dependent arising means? Brother Pat's always so quiet. He never complains to me that I didn't call on him, so I'm not sure if he feels that I should call on him more. Or what do you think?
Don't worry, you're doing fine.
What do you think? What does it sound like, dependent arising? Do you know that term, Pat? It's a very common term in Buddhism. That all of the schools accept dependent arising, but they have different interpretations of it. Do you know?
Let's hear yours.
Okay.
It'll be better.
Median, what do you think? Do you know? Or you,
Does it mean that things don't arise from what you observe, is that nothing arises from that side?
well, one of the first meanings is that phenomena do not arise without causes and conditions. It's not just like accidental. Phenomena arise in dependence on causes and conditions. That's the grossest level of dependent arising. Another level of dependent arising that's mentioned, because we talked about the 12 links of dependent arising, although sometimes it's translated as, what are they translated as? The 12 links of interdependent origination. Actually, exactly the same words, but sometimes people want to translate it differently. Still called the 12 links of dependent arising. There it's talking about phenomena arising in dependence on other conditions. In dependence on ignorance, karmic formations arise. In dependence on karmic formations, imprints are left in the consciousness. In dependence on consciousness upon which imprints have been laid, there is name and form and so forth through the 12 links. Then there's other subtler meanings. In Svatantrika, I think, we say that all phenomena are dependent arisings because they all depend on parts. Prasangika also accepts that, but that's not the subtlest meaning of dependent arising. They all arise in dependence on their parts. Because the Svatantrika say that there's a basis of designation, the parts, let's say Median's aggregates or Dorje's aggregates, those parts, the phenomena Dorje depends upon those parts. The Prasangika, the subtlest meaning of dependent arising for the Prasangika is that phenomena depend upon the basis of designation, the consciousness that's perceiving that, and the name or the concept attributed to that basis of designation. Kind of like a tripod. We'll do this after the tea break. It's tripod. I can't get tripod. If you need, tripod, each limb depends on, its stability depends on the other one holding it up, right? So these three things are interdependent: the consciousness, the basis of designation, and the name. So it said all phenomena, this is supposedly in Prasangika the subtlest meaning of dependent arising. So they have different meanings, that syllogism. All phenomena, or let's say the person, is not truly existent because it's a dependent arising. That's called the king of reason. In order to get your mind around that, you may need a little break. So let's just take a short break and come back. So something starting to maybe, sometimes as you start to hear this, there'll be so many questions arising, and there might be sometimes doubt. Oh, before I took that class in Tenets, I understood Prasangika. I really understood Prasangika. Now I took that class and I've got so many doubts and questions. Well, what do you think? Probably you didn't understand it perfectly before. Now when you start to get more things to compare it to, you start to see some inner contradictions or doubts about what you were thinking. That's fantastic. The only way that you can actually get to the right position is through that kind of process, having to grapple with these things. So I'm very happy that Tenzin was saying, wait a second. Tenzin was bringing up another term that you hear often that's relevant in this context, merely imputed. So when we talk from the Prasangika point of view, Prasangika says, the Prasangika Madhyamaka, the consequentialists, they say that phenomena are merely imputed by names and concepts. Merely imputed. That means nothing at all existing from its own side or by its own characteristic or inherently. Phenomena are merely imputed. The Svatantrika may use that term sometimes, but generally they don't say that phenomena are merely imputed in the same way, because they say phenomena are imputed independent on an inherently existent basis. That the meaning of non-true existence is that it's not enough that phenomena just are inherently existent. You have, for the phenomena to be called, to come into existence nominally, you have to impute it onto that basis. The mind has to impute it, a non-fallacious mind. The Prasangika says phenomena, no, that's not right. Phenomena are merely imputed. So Tenzin does exist. Prasangika says Tenzin does exist. It doesn't say phenomena do not exist. Prasangika and Svatantrika says phenomena do not exist truly, do not truly exist. Prasangika says phenomena do not inherently exist. There's no inherently existent Tenzin. There's no Tenzin existing from his own side. This is talking about the higher school, the Prasangika. There's no naturally existent or Tenzin existing by his own characteristic or truly existent Tenzin. That doesn't mean there's no Tenzin whatsoever. There is a Tenzin that exists conventionally. How does it exist? As the mere label Tenzin, attributed to, or what's the word? Imputed upon the basis of designation of Tenzin. That's the only Tenzin that exists. When you meditate, when you start to get your mind around that, you meditate and you just think, how does the sense of self, when you get to the subtle sense of self, you've started to eliminate some of the grosser levels of sense of self. I am my body, I am my mind, I am the controller of the aggregates. Those are still gross senses of self. The controller of the aggregates, that sense is like the self-supporting, substantially existent person. Here we're talking about even the subtler sense of a self as just though there is a self existing there inherently, without the need to impute it outside. If you just say to yourself, I exist, or to say, in my case, George is just a name. There's no George existing anywhere from its own side, somewhere inside, outside. Only George that exists is just the concept or name attributed. You can start to see then, when the mind is very calm, something that seems to be contradictory to that. That sense of self that seems to be existing from its own side, that's not merely imputed. That's the object of negation. It's that's being refuted by the Madhyamika, or especially by the Prasangika. Okay, let's continue. Now I'm going to skip over down the rest of this thing. Otherwise, we won't be able to. We can look at this, the meaning of the etymology there in more detail later. Let's just go a little bit further, because actually we didn't get any further than we did last time. We've just been elaborating. Yeah, we haven't even gotten to where we got last time. Exactly. There you go. So, was it one step forward and 2 steps back, or something like that? Okay, but I think it's worthwhile. So, for motive asserting objects, existence by way of its own characteristic, existence from its own side, and inherent existence, that's how I'll translate natural existence, are synonymous. They say they are real synonyms. For Svatantrika, they're real synonyms because those things do exist. Non-compounded space, true cessations, past, future, and subtle selflessness of persons are all non-affirming negatives as well as conventional truths. All of these would not be held as conventional truths for the Prasangika. Let's go on. Ultimate truth, reality, that was what? Dharmata, Chuni, and subtle selflessness of phenomena are synonymous. So when for the Svatantrika, ultimate truth doesn't have to do with, like in the Chittamatra, some things where ultimate truths were realized in a mode of non-dualistic mode. So it could be like the subtle selflessness of persons for them was an ultimate truth. Here, for them, that was the person being empty of being self-supporting, substantially existent. Here, the Svatantrikas, although they say there is a selflessness of persons, which is the emptiness of the person being self-supporting, substantially existent, they say that that's not ultimate truth. The subtle selflessness of phenomena, the fact that phenomena don't exist truly, is ultimate truth. The Sautrantika Svatantrika Madhyamikas assert that the five sense objects, form and so forth, are different entities from consciousness, right? They actually exist as external phenomena, and that they are gross external objects composed of partless particles. The Yogacara Svatantrika Madhyamikas assert that the five sense objects, form and so forth, are one entity with a consciousness apprehending them. So they are like the Chittamatrans, right? Remember, the Chittamatrans say that the objects that we perceive, let's say the objects of eye consciousness, the flower, doesn't exist as an external object the way that it appears, that the sense of that, the flower and the consciousness are perceiving it, both arise from one seed, one imprint on the alaya vijnana, the foundation consciousness, and that they are one substance. They're empty of being different substances. So phenomena are mere mind, chitta matra, only mind. So there's two kinds, that's one of the other distinguishing things between the Sautrantika and the Yogacara Svatantrika Madhyamikas. So now the mode of asserting subjects, that is the subjective minds for the most part, but there are other kinds of subjects, right? Articulate sounds and persons are also subjects. The Svatantrika Madhyamikas assert a group of 6 consciousnesses, and that the mental consciousness is an illustration of the person. Here it's stating that the Svatantrikas in general say there's 6 consciousnesses. There may be, I'm not sure, there may be some Yogacara Svatantrikas who say there are 8, because it seems that the Yogacara Svatantrikas were saying that the 5 sense objects are one entity with the consciousness apprehending them. Right? That infers that the Yogacara Svatantrikas accept the existence of the alaya vijnana. If they accept the alaya vijnana, then they have to accept 8 consciousnesses, right? So when it says the Svatantrika Madhyamikas assert a group of 6 consciousnesses, I think that means the main, when you talk about Svatantrika Madhyamika in general, there's more Sautrantika Svatantrikas, that's the main part. And that the mental consciousness is the illustration of the person. There are 2 types of minds, valid cognizers and non-valid, so that's the same as other schools. There are 2 types of valid cognizers, valid direct perceivers and valid inferential cognizers. Completely common ground, right? We had this, you know this backwards and forwards, right, Georgie? What? Okay. I thought you knew this backwards and forwards. The Sautrantika Svatantrika Madhyamikas do not assert self-cognizing direct perceivers. Now, remember it said the Sautrantikas mainly accorded with the Sautrantika in terms of nominal phenomena. Don't the Sautrantikas accept self-cognizers? Yeah, but only the Vaibhashikas and the Prasangikas don't accept Rangrik, or well, with some other exception here. Here, they and the Sautrantika Svatantrikas do not exert this Rangrik or self-knowing direct perceivers. That's because when you differentiate between the two, that's not one of the features. That's why I said mainly accords with the Sautrantika. It doesn't accord with everything in the Sautrantika, the Sautrantika Svatantrikas, because the Sautrantikas in general accept self-cognizers. The Yogacara Svatantrikas assert all four types of direct perceivers. What are the four types? Do you know, Thea? All four types direct perceivers?
It's a direct perceiver.
She's getting sharp.
So there's inferential cognizer.
That's not a direct perceiver. And there's four kinds of direct perceivers.
Oh, it's about. There's a yogic direct.
Good.
perceiver.
Yogic direct perceivers. It's an esoteric one.
Something about a knower.
Hey, I'll give you. Thea.
I.
Well, sense.
Sense
Direct perceivers.
Direct perceiver.
Uh,
Mental direct perceiver.
Mental direct perceivers. Yogic direct perceivers and
And.
fourth one, the one we just talked about, self-knowing direct perceivers. Okay, so there are four. That's the four. So the Yogacaras assert all four types of direct perceivers, and they assert that self-cognizing direct perceivers and yogic direct perceivers are necessarily non-mistaken consciousnesses. We're only getting to where we got last time, right? The other two types of direct perceivers have instances of both mistaken and non-mistaken consciousnesses. You can find out, if we didn't mention last time, you can check in the other text to find out what's meant by that. It's not difficult. Sautrantika, Chittamatra, and Svatantrika all assert that direct perceivers are pervaded by non-conceptual consciousness. What does that mean? If something is a direct perceiver, it is necessarily non-conceptual. That's a no-brainer, right? From what we studied before, right? You're just going to say, whoa, what's the thing nowadays? Yeah, exactly. Duh. Right? Direct perceivers are necessarily non-conceptual? What do you think, Venerable? Duh. What did they say in Scotland? They say something. Duh. Okay. But these three schools assert that direct perceivers are necessarily non-conceptual. The implication is Prasangika does not necessitate that direct perceivers are non-conceptual. For Prasangika, if something is a direct perceiver, it is not necessarily non-conceptual. Okay, so this is going to be the big question in Diane's mind driving back to Vajrapani tonight. How can that be? So you can check in Jeffrey Hopkins' book, Meditation on Emptiness, some other things, but we'll talk about that later. But let's try to get through this, otherwise we won't finish. So they also assert that subsequent cognizers are necessarily, that is, pervaded by non-valid cognizers. Does Prasangika say that if something is subsequent cognizer, it's not valid? No, because Prasangika, something doesn't have to be fresh to be valid, right? It just has to realize the object, main object. These three schools assert that consciousnesses mistaken with respect to their determined object, that means the object that is conceptually understood, this is talking about conceptual consciousness, if they're mistaken with respect to their determined object, they are necessarily wrong consciousnesses. That sounds right, doesn't it? Conceived, you could say, for determined object, you can say conceived object. If you're mistaken with respect to the conceived object, the object you're conceiving, that's got to be a mistaken consciousness, isn't it? Okay? Seems like that's what these three schools say. We'll have to check what Prasangika says. My glasses on. And they say that if it is a mistaken consciousness with respect to a phenomenon, it is necessarily non-valid mind with respect to that phenomenon. Okay? These are things that sound familiar, but later will not necessarily, there are exceptions to this, that if it is an inferential cognizer, it is necessarily a non-valid mind with respect to its appearing object. What does that mean? Is that true? If something is an inferential cognizer, is it non-valid with respect to its appearing object? What's the appearing object of an inferential cognizer? Meaning generality, right? So they say that it is necessarily non-valid. It is a non-valid mind with respect to its appearing object, the meaning generality, the generic image, and so forth. Okay, so you might want to make a note there and check in the Prasangika section, and also some of these are more easily explained than others. The mode of asserting selflessness. Okay, the Svatantrikas assert a gross selflessness of persons. This is what the other schools were talking about. Well, in fact, this is the same as the lower schools. The persons being empty of being permanent, partless, and independent. The subtle selflessness of persons is a person's emptiness of being self-supporting, substantially existent. That's the same as the selflessness of persons for the Chittamatra, the same as the selflessness of persons, gross and subtle, for the Sautrantikas, same as for the Vaibhashikas, right? I don't know do you remember, Frank? Sound familiar? Okay.
For the Vaibhashikas, was there not, that's what this was something I was confused about, that it said that there is an empty, what is it, just one soul that believes, oh, sorry,
Say that?
in the Vaibhashika,
Vaibhashika.
they say mode of a certain selflessness, and that they assert a self-supporting, substantially existent self that is neither one with or different from the aggregates.
They're not the Vaibhashikas in general.
That's
There's
just
one.
one school, the
There's one
Vaibhashikas.
school. Was it the Vaisuputriyas? Those are the sort of the mavericks. They're kind of like the Dorjes of the Vaibhashika school. In general, there's even doubt whether they would. It sounds like they don't. They're not even. Some people say they're not even Buddhist because they talk about a self of persons like that. Okay. Okay. The Yogacara. Okay, so that's the selflessness of persons. And a subtle selflessness of persons, that is, a person's emptiness of being self-supporting, substantially existent. Now, the Yogacara Svatantrikas assert a gross selflessness of phenomena that is that form and form apprehending valid cognizers' emptiness of being other substances. That's the Chittamatra view, right? Because the Yogacara Svatantrikas talk about that as being the gross selflessness of phenomena, and a subtle selflessness of phenomena, that is the phenomena's emptiness of true existence. Okay? The does it give the Sautrantika? Okay, it doesn't say exactly here. So the Sautrantika Svatantrikas don't talk about the form and form apprehending consciousness being empty of other substances. Why not? Oh, that's one reason. Yeah, that's not a very good reason. Yeah. Above, the second line of this page, the Sautrantika Svatantrikas assert that the five sense objects, form and so forth, are different entities from the consciousness. So they don't assert that they are empty of being other substances. They say they are other substances. They're like the realists, in a sense. There is a real external world. It's only the Yogacara Svatantrikas that have this gross selflessness of phenomena, which is like the Chittamatra view, and a subtle selflessness of phenomena, which is like the Madhyamika view, the Svatantrika view of selflessness, of emptiness. So for the Yogacaras, they talk about the three kinds of practitioners, the hearers, the solitary realizers, and the bodhisattvas. They each take as their main object of meditation three different things. Hearers mainly take the selflessness of persons, subtle selflessness of persons as their object of meditation, and with that they can escape from samsara. The solitary realizers mainly take the emptiness, the gross emptiness of phenomena, that is, that form and form realizing consciousness are empty of being different substances, that there's no external world, they take that as their object of meditation and achieve a middling enlightenment, the solitary realizer's enlightenment. The bodhisattvas, while realizing these other two, mainly take the subtlest form of emptiness, that phenomena are empty of being truly existent, as their main object of meditation, and they achieve via that, they can eliminate the subtle obstructions to omniscience and achieve Buddhahood. By realizing the other two, the selflessness of persons or the gross selflessness of phenomena, it's not possible to eliminate the obstructions to omniscience for the Svatantrikas and attain enlightenment. But you could achieve, without realizing subtle emptiness of phenomena for them, you could achieve nirvana. And even for the Swatrantika Svatantrikas, you could achieve nirvana merely by realizing that the person is empty of being self-supporting, substantially existent, just like the lower tenets, just like the Chittamatra also. Okay? They say, the Yogacaras say, the two selflessnesses, the subtle selflessnesses of person and phenomena, are differentiated according to their objects of negation. This is an important point. I'd put a little mark here to go with this. This is a very, very important point. The Svatantrikas and other schools also, but especially the Svatantrikas, say that the selflessness of persons, the subtle selflessness of persons, which is the person being empty of being self-supporting, substantially existent, and the subtle selflessness of phenomena, that phenomena are empty of being truly existent, these are differentiated according to the objects of negation, isn't it? What's being negated in the selflessness of persons? A self-supporting, substantially existent person. What's negated in the subtle selflessness of phenomena? Truly existent phenomena is being negated. So something different is being negated. Whereas for the Prasangika, the subtle selflessness of persons is the person being empty of true existence. And the subtle selflessness of phenomena is the phenomena being empty of true existence. So it's not differentiated by way of the object of negation. Subtle for Prasangika, the selflessness of persons and phenomena are differentiated by means of the basis. One is persons, one is phenomena. But what is being negated in both cases is true existence for the Prasangika. Here, for the Svatantrika, they're differentiated by the object of negation, what's being negated. This is because the refutation of the object of negation, true existence, upon the base person, is the subtle selflessness of phenomena, and the refutation of a self-supporting substantial existence upon the base person is the subtle selflessness of persons. So for the is a subtle selflessness, that's wrong. I should say. Oh, no, that's right. That's right. I thought I was reading in the wrong direction. This is because say you take on one basis, you take the person as the basis, you refute one thing, and that's called the selflessness of persons. If you refute self-supporting substantial existence, that's called the selflessness of the person. If you refute a different thing, a more subtle thing, true existence, that's called the selflessness of phenomena. But that's not the same as in the Prasangika. The two self-graspings are differentiated according to the manner of grasping and not according to their referent object. What are the two self-graspings? Me, myself, and I? No, that's three.
Personal phenomenon.
Self-grasping. When it says self-grasping, does it sound like person? It has to be self-grasping is only talking about persons? When it's talking about self, we say dangzin. Dak means self. Like your Tibetan scholars, bao da ga dak means self or atma. So self-grasping, daksin, there's two kinds of self-grasping. Self-grasping to persons, self-grasping to phenomena. So that's grasping to some kind of self-existence. the two self-graspings are differentiated according to the manner of grasping and not according to their referent object. I say, what does this mean? This is because in referring or in reference to the base, the person, and grasping that person as truly existent, okay, grasping the person as truly existent, that's called the self-grasping of phenomena. If you, in referring to the person and grasping it as self-supporting, substantially existent, that's called the self-grasping of persons. This is in no way contradictory to the previous paragraph. It's sort of rephrasing the previous paragraph in other words. So if you look at those two paragraphs on the bottom of page 15, try to see that they're consistent with one another. Just talking about in terms of what's being negated and what the manner in which the mind grasps erroneously to true existence. Okay, the presentation of the grounds and paths. Salam Ginamshak. So the Yogacaras Vatantrikas posit the differences between the persons of the three vehicles. So this is the ones we were just talking about. The Yogacaras say there's three kinds of selflessnesses, subtle selflessness, three kinds of selflessness that are realized by the three beings. The hearers realize what? For the Yogacaras, they realize that the person is empty of being self-supporting, substantially existent. Solitary realizers realize that phenomena are empty of being different substances from the consciousness that are validly cognizing them. And the bodhisattvas realize that phenomena are empty of true existence. Has some feeling what we're talking about here? Don? Carrie? Yogacaras Vatantrikas posit the differences between the persons of the three vehicles, that means the hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas, to be that they have three different obstacles as main objects to be abandoned, and three different views as main objects of meditation. We just mentioned what their main objects of meditation are, right? This subtle selflessness of persons, the gross selflessness of phenomena, and the subtle selflessness of phenomena. Holders of the hearer lineage take as their main objects of abandonment the conception grasping a self-supporting, substantially existent person, together with its retinue. They take that as their main object of abandonment, and they take the antidote to that, the view realizing the emptiness of a self-supporting, substantially existent person, as their main object of meditation. And from that, they attain small enlightenment. So those two statements, one is talking about what's the object of abandonment and what is the view that brings that about. This is sort of similar to this juxtaposition of these two paragraphs before. They're just talking about the same phenomena from two different points of view. Holders of the solitary realizer lineage, the Pratyeka Buddhas, people who are of that lineage, take as their main object of abandonment the conception grasping form and form apprehending valid cognizers to be other substances. What does that mean? Do you remember? Who can I ask? Pardon? Yeah.
The cognizers are not separate, they arise from the same cognizing.
That's the true thing, but the conception that they want to abandon is that they are different substances. Leave the empty alone. The conception that's wrong, that they want to abandon, here says, take as their main object of abandonment. If you just want to talk about the object of abandonment, is the conception holding that form and form apprehending consciousness are different substances. For them, that's a wrong view, right? That has to be abandoned. That's not the Sautrantika Svatantrikas wouldn't necessarily have that view. This view of three different lineages is the view that in the Abhisamaya Alamkara, I mentioned before, the commentary to the Prajnaparamita that is studied, mainly that was written by Maitreya and written down by Asanga in Tushita Heaven. That's mainly from, the commentary by Haribhadra and others, mainly seems to be from the Svatantrika, the Yogacara Svatantrika point of view, because it is differentiating that the solitary realizers realize this gross selflessness of phenomena, the bodhisattvas realize the subtle selflessness of phenomena, and the hearers only realize the subtle selflessness of persons. So the holders of the solitary realizer lineage take as their main object of abandonment the conception grasping that form and form apprehending valid cognizers are other substances, and they take as their main object of meditation, this is what you're thinking of, Don, the view, this is what they meditate on. The main object of meditation is the view realizing the emptiness of subject and object being other substances. This is another way of saying form and form realizing consciousness. The antidote, which that view is the antidote to that conception, and from that they attain a middling enlightenment. Okay. It's clear, right? Some people are probably saying, what is he talking about? First, you guys are listening to it in the middle here, it's not going to be clear, but anyway. Bodhisattvas, the third practitioners of the third vehicle, take as their main object of abandonment grasping at true existence together with its propensities. That's different than its seeds. That means the imprints. Bodhisattvas take not only the grasping to true existence, also its seeds, but also its imprints. Those imprints of the grasping to true existence are like the knowledge obscurations. They take that as their main objects of meditation, and they take that, the main object of abandonment as that, and they take as their main object of meditation the view realizing the non-true existence of all phenomena, which is the antidote to that grasping, and thereby they attain the great enlightenment of a Buddha. Okay? Now, different than that, according to the Sautrantika Svatantrikas, I leave off the word Majjhamaka, because if you say Sautrantika Svatantrika, there can only be Majjhamikas. There is no difference between hearers and solitary realizers. Because they don't accept that there is, they accept, the Sautrantikas accept that there is an external existence, that form and form realizing consciousness are different substances. So the solitary realizers don't have a different object of meditation than the hearers for the Sautrantikas. There's no difference between hearers and solitary realizers regarding their main objects of abandonment and main objects of meditation, because they are alike in taking deluded obstacles as their main objects of abandonment, and they are alike also in taking selflessness of person as their main objects of meditation. So this is interesting. So this is something to get your mind around. This is something for Carrie to grok now. Okay, this point now. Deluded obstacle. What's a deluded obstacle for the Svatantrikas? Well, let's say for the Sautrantika Svatantrikas. Obviously anger, attachment, ignorance. Self-grasping of persons. All of them coming from self-grasping of persons. Those are deluded obstacles. They don't call the true grasping to phenomena, grasping to true existence, they don't call that a deluded obstacle or an obstacle to liberation. They believe that you can achieve, although you can eliminate that kind of grasping to true existence, you don't have to eliminate it to achieve nirvana. And the obstructions to nirvana are called deluded obstructions. So for them, grasping to true existence is not a klesha. You know what I mean? Is not a klesha. It's not one word, a klesha. Is not a klesha. Is not a delusion. Is not an affliction. Grasping to true existence. But for prasangika, that is an affliction. That is the main affliction. That is a deluded obscuration. And all of the hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas all have to eliminate that grasping to true existence, even to attain nirvana, let alone enlightenment. So there's a big difference there. Yes.
As in phenomena, external objects, not self.
Remember, you can even take, let's take Venerable Anji, the person Anji, as the basis. If we realize that Anji is empty of being self-supporting, substantially existent, on the basis Anji, that's called the selflessness of the person. If on the basis of Anji, we see that Anji is empty of being truly existent, it's also true, more subtle thing, that's called the emptiness of phenomena, even though it's on the person. For the Svatantrikas. For the Prasangika, realizing that Anji is empty of true existence is not called the emptiness of phenomena, it's called the emptiness of persons. Because it's differentiated by the basis, not the object of negation. That was what I was pointing out before. It'll come a little more clear when we talk about the Prasangika. Yeah, it's a lot to get your mind around here, Venerable. It's a wee bit tricky, is it? Are you looking forward to seeing the last of the Lord of the, what's the last one called? Lord of the Rings? The Return of the King? I heard they just had the world, they had a big party for it. I don't think they had the world premiere yet down in where was it? Somewhere in New Zealand. What was one of the big cities? No, it wasn't Auckland. It was Wellington, I think. Wellington, yeah. It's on the South Island, or near the South Island. Do they speak with a Scottish accent? Did you see those? In the Lord of the Rings? Not really. Okay, I thought they did. I thought the hobbits, just a wee bit. Some reason I thought the hobbits had some kind of Scottish accent. Okay, so according to the Sautrantika Svatantrikas, there's no difference between hearers and solitary realizers regarding their main objects of abandonment and their main objects of meditation, because they are alike in taking the deluded obstacles, that is the grasp, all of the delusions and the main ignorance of those delusions, meaning the grasping that the person is self-supporting, substantially existent. They take that as their objects of abandonment, and they are alike in taking the selflessness of persons, that's the antidote to all of those delusions and their main ignorance, the grasping to the self of persons, taking selflessness of persons as their main object of meditation. Peter, are you making some sense? Slowly.
Making sense when you say it, when I read it,
But yeah, you just have to think about.
hard to take back.
Yeah, okay. You'll think about it again. However, there is a reason why the two have different fruit, inferior and superior. What are the different two here? What are the two that's referred to? Georgie, you know. The two are. No. Hearers and solitary realizers. It says they're the same in their objects of abandonment and objects of meditation, but the two have different fruits. There is a reason why they have different fruits. One of them is inferior. The hearers is an inferior fruit or effect or result, and the solitary realizers' result is superior. Why is that? It's because they have differences due to the extent of their collection of merit and the length of time spent accumulating merit. Okay? Usually, we saw before, often in the Hinayana, it says the hearers attain their goal in as little as 3 lifetimes, maybe up to 16 lifetimes. Solitary realizers, how long does it take them? Are they dumber? Takes them longer? They're dumberer than the hearers. They're dumberer than the hearers, according to Dorji. Maybe 100 eons, because they have a goal in mind. They want to achieve, in their final enlightenment, they want to achieve their own enlightenment, their nirvana, without the presence of a teaching Buddha. They have a certain kind of mindset. And even among the solitary realizers, there's different kinds. There's some that are called rhinoceros-like, that just go by themselves, and then there are others that are congregators. So So mainly the solitary realizers collect merit over a longer period of time. The Svatantrikas assert two kinds of sutras, Mahayana sutras and Hinayana sutras. What did the Hinayanists accept? Did they accept that there are two kinds of sutras? Dorje says no. Good Dorje. Why don't the Hinayana accept? Why don't they say there's two kinds of sutras? They just accept the Mahayana sutras? The Hinayana? They only accept the Hinayana sutras. Like in the Theravada, which is the main proponent today, what are their sutras? What do they refer to their sutras as? The Pali, well, they say the Pali Canon, which has the Sutra Pitaka, the Vinaya Pitaka, and the Abhidharma Pitaka. They say that's what Buddha taught. Everything else is bogus. The so-called Mahayana sutras, the great 100,000 this, 100,000 that, talking about Buddhas with magical powers and everyone becomes Buddha. That's just later people's fantasies, corruption of the Buddha's original intention that only the Bhikshu Sangha can attain arhatship, and they just take the hard line. So the original, nowadays, if you talk to some Theravada practitioners, not familiar with their own tenets, they kind of mix things together. Maybe it seems like everything's the same. They say, oh yeah, we practice bodhicitta too in the Theravada. Actually, it's not in their system at all. But having heard Mahayana teachers, Dalai Lama, also Thich Nhat Hanh is a great conduit that's connecting Mahayana with some Theravada practitioners, because in Vietnam, you know who Thich Nhat Hanh is? The Vietnamese teacher, contemporary? Some of you? In Vietnam, the system that he grew up through, although he didn't accept completely, had both Theravada practitioners there in living tradition and Mahayana, mainly Chittamatra view. His view is very much Chittamatra, but still a little bit not classic Chittamatra. And so he acts as a good connection between taking the Bodhisattva vows. Many Theravada practitioners go to his courses because he does a lot of breathing meditation and the four placements of mindfulness and walking meditation, something that they're very familiar with. And then he introduces them to compassion and the Mahayana, kind of from the Chittamatra point of view in a sense. So nowadays, because of those kind of connections, it almost seems that some people think this Hinayana, this is a pejorative term the Mahayanas have conjured up out of pride, and that's bad. There was one, I think I told you, there's one scholar, was this Dan Lopez, I think? Don Lopez. You know Don Lopez? Don Lopez wrote in one of the articles in Tricycle or something, the H word. You know what this supposed to mean? Like in when kids are naughty, you say, don't say the S word or something like that, right? So the H word, what's the H word? Hinayana. Oh, you shouldn't say Hinayana, that's a bad word. But actually, you can understand in the Mahayana Sutras, the Buddha did say to the bodhisattvas, those who were proto-bodhisattvas, capable of following the Mahayana, said, just like a school teacher who was teaching shop, let's say. I was teaching home economics or shop. And say Dorje came to my class. And I said, Dorje, don't be satisfied with what I'm teaching you here in shop. You have the capacity for become a scientist or just something else. So this is what when the Buddha said, don't be satisfied with my lesser vehicle. You should practice the great vehicle. That was an exhortation to those who were of the Bodhisattva lineage, who could be awakened in the Bodhisattva lineage. It wasn't that he was demeaning his own teachings. He was just saying that, in general, this is what's maybe suitable for most people who are not capable of developing that altruistic wish to remain in samsara for the sake of others. So it's not an H word, I think, is a valid word, but one has to be culturally sensitive, I guess. Okay. The Svatantrikas assert two kinds of sutras, Mahayana and Hinayana. So they do say that there are Hinayana sutras that the Buddha taught, mainly for the Hinayana. And like the Chittamatrans, they accept two parts of sutras, two kinds, two delineations, those that are definitive and those that are interpretative. Here she's got interpretive. I think it actually should be interpretative, but anyway. So this is one of the big subjects. When we talk about what sutras, what of the Buddha's teachings are definitive and which of them are to be interpreted. Like when the Buddha told Ajatashatru, you know who Ajatashatru was? King Bimbisara's son. Ajatashatru was the prince. He imprisoned his father. He caused blood to be drawn from the Buddha's body. Remember with the Devadatta? He caused schism in the Sangha. He committed all five, I think, of the five actions of immediate retribution that are sometimes called the five heinous crimes. Heavy dude, huh? And I don't know, who would it be today? I don't want to get there. Okay, this get me into trouble again if people are watching this in some other place. So the Buddha said to him, he appeared, Ajatashatru, when his father died, the king had died, King Bimbisara, who was one of the main benefactors of the Buddha, and he was totally, depressed now. He realized after some time that he had caused his father's death indirectly. He'd imprisoned his father died while in prison, and he was sort of inconsolable. And the Buddha came to him and he said, why are you so sad? Father is to be killed, mother is to be killed. And hearing those words at first, do you think that was the Buddha's definitive meaning? Was that a sutra? Because sutra doesn't mean necessarily book. Sutra can mean just passage too. Was that a passage that was to be meant definitively, or it had to be interpreted? It had to be interpreted. So the interpretive meaning of that was that the mother of our delusions had to be killed, and so forth, like that. So many times the Buddha, in various circumstances, said certain things which were not definitive meaning. So sometimes it means, according to some of the lower schools, the Hinayana, the interpretive sutras, are those which cannot be taken literally. And the definitive ones are those that can be taken literally. The Svatantrika, the Chittamatra, the Svatantrika, and the Prasangika all have different views about what constitutes a definitive sutra and an interpretive sutra. Okay. So for the Prasangika, the definitive sutras, those passages of the sutras that are definitive, are those passages that talk about, that mention that phenomena are not truly existent, are not inherently existent, are not naturally existent. Everything else is interpretable because it's talking about conventional reality, which is not the ultimate intent. So that, again, the Prasangika has a very radical view about what is an interpretive sutra and what is a definitive sutra. So, and like the Chittamatrans, they assert two kinds of sutras, the definitive and interpretative. However, the indication is different, how they indicate them, how they delineate them, because the Chittamatrans assert that the first two wheels are sutras of interpretive meaning, right? This is what Frank, Al? Interesting. Okay. That Mark was saying before. I think Frank was saying, real Frank was saying this. The Chittamatrans assert the actual definitive sutras were the sutras of the third turning of the wheel. So the first two are subject to interpretation. because the first wheel said all phenomena are truly existent, the second wheel said no phenomena are truly existent, whereas in reality some are and some aren't. Okay? According to this system, this Svatantrika, the first and last wheels are sutras of interpretative meaning, and the middle wheel, that's where the Buddha taught the Prajnaparamita Sutras, has two parts, interpretive and definitive. So the first and the third are definitely interpretive, and the Prajnaparamita Sutras have sections which are interpretive and some that are definitive. They assert that those sutras of the middle wheel, in which the object of negation is joined with the qualification ultimately, are sutras of definitive meaning. This is important. You put another little thing in your partner right here. Okay, this is an important point. They assert that those sutras of the middle wheel, that's like the Prajnaparamita Sutras, in which the object of negation is joined with a qualification ultimately, quote unquote, are sutras of definitive meaning, and those of the middle wheel in which the object of negation is not joined with a qualification ultimately are sutras of interpretative meaning, or interpretive meaning. So for the Svatantrikas, what would they say, Venerable, about the Heart Sutra? Is that a definitive sutra, Svatantrikas? When the object, what's negated in the Heart Sutra, what you remember we were doing in class earlier? What's being negated? Form is empty. Emptiness. There is no eye, there is no ear, there is no nose. Even when it's said, in fact, it's said that phenomena are, Avalokiteshvara was meditating, and that phenomena were empty of inherent existence. So they wouldn't call that a sutra of definitive meaning, whereas for the Prasangika, that is a sutra of definitive meaning. There's a lot of times in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, sometimes when the Buddha was refuting phenomena, he said that phenomena do not inherently exist. If the Svatantrika position was, they do not exist inherently, ultimately, but they do conventionally exist inherently. Conventionally, phenomena do inherently exist, but ultimately, all phenomena are non-existent. Ultimately, in emptiness, you might say. For Svatantrika is saying you have to say ultimately for it to be the actual, because conventionally things do exist inherently. Remember, they said there is an inherent existence, natural existence. So just for auspiciousness, let's start the next section. We'll have 2 weeks now to do the Prasangika and to kind of pull things together. And what do you think? Starting to get some glimmer of the differences between this? What do you think, Mark? Something? Is it better than you felt during the first courses we took? So this could be encouraged to Tenzin and Elizabeth. So when we were doing the first courses, the first couple of weeks, they said, I don't understand anything. first couple of months, okay. Well, it goes without saying. Okay. So, page 17, the Prasangika Madhyamika. Prasanga means consequence. So a Prasangika is someone who you could call a consequentialist. So basically it means the idea is that in order to realize emptiness, you don't have to posit reasons, and certainly you can't posit autonomous reasons, because such things don't exist from the Prasangika point of view. Autonomous reasons were things where the reasoning was joined by some kind of inherently existent 3 modes. Such a thing doesn't even exist. But you don't have to posit reasonings to realize emptiness. It's sufficient to posit absurd consequences to a sharp opponent for them to realize emptiness. So that's how the name consequentialist or prasangika. Prasanga means consequence. So prasangika, ika at the end means like one who's, you could say, consequentialist. Again, it has 7 divisions. The definition of a prasangika is a majjhimika who, by means of positing a mere consequence, like Tenzin, where you're talking about merely imputed. Here, the consequence, the 3 modes are not inherently existent. They're existent, conventionally, merely imputed. By means of positing a mere consequence, known to the other, does not accept true existence even nominally. Here it's talking about a consequence, not even talking about a syllogism. Examples of prasangikas are Buddhapalita. He was the one who wrote the text by his name that Bhavaviveka criticized. Chandrakirti, who, remember I mentioned some traditions hold Chandrakirti was the reincarnation of Buddhapalita, born some time later, and no longer hindered by the fact that Bhavaviveka was a Brahmin and Buddhapalita was a lower caste in that previous life. Now he could speak out against Buddhapalita. Chandrakirti is the author of the main text that we study in the monasteries for Madhyamaka, the Madhyamika Vatara. And Shantideva. You know Shantideva? Bodhisattva Charyavatara? He is a prasangika. He holds to the prasangika. So that's what the wisdom section of the Bodhisattva Charyavatara is one of the main sources for the prasangika view. So let's leave it there. We're going okay. We're going okay. Let's dedicate the merits. As Rupa Rinpoche mentioned this last weekend, but the Kadampa Geshis emphasizing the importance of the beginning and the end. The beginning, have a proper motivation, the end to dedicate, but even in the middle, to try to do with concentration, as he was talking about concentration, whatever you're doing in a proper, effective way. So now try to dedicate the merit. Due to this merit that I've created, both now, tonight, with proper motivation, in the past, that has not yet ripened, due to this merit may there quickly develop in my own mind stream and the mind stream of all sentient beings, the bodhicitta that has not yet developed, and may that small seedlings of sprouts of bodhicitta that have arisen not decline, but increase as a result of this merit. See if you can make a conventional dedication like that. And then seal that in the emptiness of the 3 spheres, recognizing the elements of the previous dedication, the merits dedicated, the object, the goals dedicated to, and the act of dedication, all as empty of true existence, all as empty of inherent existence from the prasangika point of view, only merely imputed merits that we've created, but they still function. Only a merely imputed dedication, imputed upon the elements. You can't find dedication anywhere. Just a name we impute to that whole basis of designation. And the goals dedicated to, also, if you analyze, cannot be found, but they do exist conventionally, will arise as a result of cause and effect, but empty of true existence.